With the issue of streaming, you stay at home and you can follow the AGM, which is very comfortable too. Well, as we are opening the AGM as usual, what we do is, well, first of all, we make some considerations on the fiscal year that finished last year, although everybody's thinking about the future. And the truth is that the past fiscal year, we're not very concerned about it. But what we do have to do is talk about what has happened in the company, what's happened to the company in these three waves we've gone through, and what's happening now to the company, because well, subsequent to these three waves, we can see that the economic system in which we are operating, well, there are days when it seems that it goes in one direction and another day in another direction. But I would like to talk about the company model. Is our company adapting to these new times or not? And the first answer to this question is that yes, we do have a model that is adapted perfectly well, and we have a model that there's no need for us to change it. And what we found that it was very difficult to explain what Dominion is all about, which is one of the issues that people always ask you about, and you start to explain things and you just can't explain everything in only one line, but rather you merely need a full sheet to do so. But deep down, and if we now look into how many companies have been behaving in a very complex manner, and I'm talking about technological firms and others, but the birth of the word ecosystem and all of these other considerations make people have a better understanding of what Dominion is all about and the way Dominion works. And the first thing we can say is that for the three waves, we have been very ready. These three waves we've had to address with all of these problems. And the final wave was the Ukraine issue. But finally, the company has behaved perfectly well. So that means that the feelings we have is that we have a good model, and that this model allows you to develop a very suitable culture for these moments of crisis. And this is something that we already demonstrated when we had lots of growth. And now, at this point in time, we also have the suitable model in place, and that's why we think that we have to continue with it. Right. But without talking about the fundamental changes, because we do believe that we should continue with these basic parameters. What we are seeing, however, is that this economic moment or this framework is changing certain things in the way we proceed. And fundamentally, I would focus here on what has to do with the M&A world, because we've always had a growth strategy with lots of M&A. We also like the system based on 50-50 and growing organically and inorganically, because we believe that we have the necessary capability. But at times like these, it's not very clear. At moments of crisis, we're not sure about inorganic growth. You have to be very careful. You have to be very cautious, and you must bear in mind all the figures, and especially because of all the assets that can arrive, can change very quickly in the world of the economy. So this is why our world of M&A is much more focused on doing things in a safe manner. And we don't think that until the good times come back again, we don't think that we can carry out major operations. And then, as regards not using company flows for the world of M&A, what we are going to offer are two different kinds of uses for that money. One of them is based on increasing organic growth. In other words, what we're going to try to do is grow in our organic world, and we can even change our perimeters of consolidation, because in the case of those elements that are under our management, we believe that we can increase and improve things, which is a relevant issue. And it's one of the possibilities that's always been at our disposal, but we believe that possibly over the next few months and years we'll be developing even further. But then there's a second use that for our shareholder base, I think is a very interesting option. And that is that we can pay some significant dividends, and not only that, but also we can make use of resources to buy back our shares, which is this double use of the money that reaches our shareholders. And we believe that shareholders like it when at times like this, well, this represents a very significant focus on the future of the company, because if we're buying back our shares, it's because we believe that that is the best investment. And well, it's different compared to external M&A, because when you're buying a share, something that you know perfectly well, you know how it's going to develop and you know what the prospects are going to be like. So this is what the change is all about. So we're talking about a change of our movement in our resources, but we're not talking about changing the model. The model is the one we had before, and we're fully convinced about its solidity. And we also believe that it's going to be a model that's going to be as successful as it was in the good days. And we've resisted perfectly well. And when the good days come back again, we're sure that we'll be ready to take another very significant leap. And it's organic growth. And I would like to stress this, which perhaps in the next few months is going to be the most important element. Okay. And I don't want to bore you anymore with more remarks on my part. And if you want, I'm now going to give the floor to the Secretary so that he can inform on the terms of this AGM. The Board of Directors of Global Dominion Access, in its meeting held on February the 24th, agreed to call the AGM of this company to be held today at 12:30 in its first call, and if not on the following day in the second call at the Vizcaya Eredua, Avenida Bandivara number 23 in Bilbao. The call was published on April the 8th of 2022 in the El País newspaper and in the corporate website, and also on the CNMV website. And therefore, according to what the bylaws say and according to the regulations applicable to shareholders, we have the president and the secretary who are members of the board. The list of attendees is currently under development, but we can advance the number of shares and shareholders we have here that are either present or represented that have the right to vote. I'd like to say that share capital of our company is 20,087,722 euros with 125 cents. It's divided in 161,701,777 shares of 125 cents of euros of nominal value each, which represent only one class. All of them are ordinary and which are represented by means of account annotations and which are fully subscribed and fully paid out. So now, what we can also point out there are 53 shareholders in attendance that are present here, or who have exercised their right to participate in this AGM through remote voting systems or through correspondence. And these 53 attendees represent 61,875,714 shares, which accounts for 38.47% of the share capital. Represented, we have 28 shareholders that represent 26,525,716 shares, which represents 16.51% of the share capital. So therefore, and in an aggregated manner, we have here present and represented 81 shareholders that represent 88,350,890 shares, which represent 54.9% of the share capital. So the final figures regarding those that are present, those represented, will be reported later. And now that we've gone through the attendance cards, we can say that more than 50% of the company's share capital is represented. So therefore, we have the minimum quorum that is divided by Articles 183, 194, and 201 of the Stock Corporations Law. Because if you want to hold a meeting like the one we're holding here in this first call, you must have more than 50% of the share capital represented by the shareholders. So therefore, I'd like to propose that this AGM is validly constituted so that we can now discuss the issues that are on the agenda. Okay, well, as we've met the requirements demanded by the law and by the bylaws, I declare that this AGM is validly constituted, organized by Global Dominion Access, and the Secretary will now speak to us about the agenda. Well, as mentioned previously, the agenda for this AGM has the following items. Firstly, we're going to examine and approve the global accounts of our company, and also the accounts of the consolidated group of the fiscal year that closed on December the 31st, 2021. Secondly, we're going to approve the management of the board. Thirdly, we're going to approve the how to apply the results to the 2021 fiscal year. Point number 4, examination and approval of the non-consolidated financial statement of Dominion and its companies in relation to the 2021. Point number 5, approval of the distribution of reserves. Point number 6, well, as authorized in April, we authorized the board of directors to carry out the buyback of shares either directly or through our companies according to Articles 146 and 509. And to reduce, we're assuring share capital to reduce the effect. And point number 7, we have to appoint the account auditors of the company's consolidated companies. And then finally, we have to establish the maximum amount of remuneration for the directors. And point number 9, we have to approve a new remuneration policy for the directors for the fiscal years 2023, 24, and 25. Point 10, approval of supplementary incentive based on increasing the value of the Global Dominion shares for the CEO and certain members of the management team. Point number 11, ratification and appointment of Doña Paula Faldueña as a member of the board of directors under the category of a propriety director. And point 12, authorizing the board with powers of substitution to increase share capital according to the terms established in Article 297(1)(b) of the stock exchange corporations, the limiting up to 20% of share capital according to the terms of Article 506. And point 12.13, authorizing the board of directors to issue securities and convertible bonds and warrants, and also establish the criteria to determine the modalities for conversion and also attribution to the board of directors to empower them to increase share capital as required, and also to exclude the preferential right of purchase that is to be limited to 20% of the share capital. Point number 14, and that has to be voted upon the annual remuneration report on directors' wages. And then point number 15, execution of these agreements, and point 16, and final point, approval of the minutes. And now the secretary is going to describe the agreements that are suggested according to the items on the agenda. Well, as I pointed out before, and when this call was made public for this AGM on the website of the CNMB, as well as on the corporate website, we made available to the shareholders the complete texts of the different agreements that are now subject to vote. So this is why, to the extent that the contents of these documents is public and is available, or has been available since April the 8th. What we are going to propose to this AGM is only refer to those issues that are most fundamental, that have to do with the different agreements. And if any shareholders in the Q&A wishes to read out the complete text or any particular agreements, we will do so. And well, the agreements are, or the resolutions are, the first point refers to the approval of the annual accounts of the company, the annual accounts of its consolidated group, as well as social management actions corresponding to the fiscal year that finished on December the 31st, 2021. Secondly, approval of the board of directors actions. And thirdly, approval of the proposal to apply the result corresponding to the economic fiscal year closing on December the 31st as follows. The profit of the individual company, 14,956,000 euros, to be allocated to legal reserves, that is 1.4906 million, and monetary reserves 13 million euros, within the framework of consolidated result of 42,219,000. And point number 4, approval of the non-financial statement of the group for the fiscal year that finished on December the 31st of 2021. Point number 5 refers to transferring the amount of 20 million euros from the account that has to do with available reserves from premium issues for a total amount of 12 million euros and the merger reserves for 8 million. So therefore the final balance can be cancelled, and the balance of the reserved funds can total 17 million. And it is also suggested that we also pay out a complementary dividend totaling 0.08757 euros per each share of the company, and the maximum amount to be paid is 14,073,000 euros. if the distribution is carried out in favor of all of the ordinary shares of the company. And the distribution, should it be approved, will be carried out on July the 6th of 2022. Point number 6 has to do with the agreement on the decision taken on April the 13th, which authorized the board to buy back shares according to the terms established in Article 146, so that the capital could be reduced through amortization. Point number 7, we propose the extension of the contract with Pricewaterhouse as account auditors for the company and its consolidated firms. And point number 8 refers to establishing a maximum amount of the remuneration of directors for the current fiscal year according to the remuneration policy that is currently in place and that was approved by AGM on May the 6th, 2020. And in this regard, establishing an aggregate sum for these remunerations for the directors, and it's 950,000 euros. Point number 9 proposes, according to the new wording of Article 519 of the Stock Corporations Law, the application of a new remuneration policy for the directors for the period 2023-2025, I think he said. And point number 10, and according to the agreements that have been passed, suggest the proposal of a long-term incentive that is based on increasing the value of the shares for the CEO and for certain members of the board, for the management board. And here we have, in the text, we have the different formulas that have been used to calculate all the numbers. And if you want, we can talk about this in greater detail when the Q&A session starts. And point number 10 has to do with the appointment of Ms. Paula Talui Yegaña as a member of the board of directors. She's been appointed by co-opting. She was appointed on February the 4th, and she will be a director for 4 years, and she will be a proprietary director. And point 12 refers to authorizing the board to increase share capital according to Articles 271, Article 1B, to be able to exclude the right of preferential purchase up to 20%. And Article 23 also talks about the issue of securities and warrants, and also makes it possible to increase share capital in that regard with the same limit for the possible exclusion of the preferential right of subscription. And these two articles are therefore going to be voted on because of the modification of the law, and this reduces the threshold on the basis of which it is possible to carry out this exclusion, and 50%, which was previously in force, and it's now 20%, which is the figure currently applied. And finishing, point number 14 refers to the voting process, although from a consultative point of view, and that is the report on the annual remuneration of the directors as approved by the board of directors, and which was published on February the 24th of 2022. Point number 15 refers to the agreement that we included in all the AGMs that as regards to the delegation of powers or faculties for any public deeds that have to do with the agreements passed at this AGM, so that we can register everything at the mercantile register or the company register. And then there are another 3 issues that don't form part of the agenda as such, but I think that we should inform people, which are the following. The first one, and as we've already referred to when we mentioned the different items on the agenda, the AGM will carry out a voting process on the annual report on director remuneration according to Article 541. And this report covers complete and transparent information, fully understandable, on the remuneration policy for the directors and how this has been implemented in the year 2021 and how it will be carried out in this fiscal year, in 2022. And I would also like to tell the AGM that the Audit and Compliance Committee of the company on an annual basis performs an analysis of all of its activities and issues a report. And in that report, it also includes a report on the independence of the company's account auditors that is mentioned by Article 18. And then from the point of view of corporate governance, we also have to say that the corporate governance report that was approved by the board of directors states that governance recommendations have been observed in full and have been complied with, but recommendations 563 were not complied with. Recommendations 4, 15, 18, 25, 26, and 27, and 52, and 53, 59, 64 partially complied with, and the rest of them are obviously fully complied with. And this report includes a number of explanations, and the board of directors understand that the degree of compliance is satisfactory or more than satisfactory for a company of this kind of profile. And if during the Q&A any shareholders want us to discuss this even further, we can do so. Because if you think that this is partially being complied with, we can discuss it later on. And that's all from me for the time being. I'm sorry, the microphone was off there. The fiscal year ending on December the 31st, as well as how the company has progressed. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear shareholders, friends. Well, firstly, I would like to thank you for coming to this ordinary AGM. I hope that more people are following us streaming because there are not very many people in person, but let's summarize the year 2021. I think that practically everybody knows the data, but you know that we have to do this due to legal imperatives, and I don't want to bore you. We prepared a video for you so that it can be self-explanatory.
En Dominion, 2021 ha sido un año de récord, apoyados en nuestro modelo de gestión y capacidad de ejecución diferencial. Hemos continuado creciendo hasta alcanzar unas ventas ajustadas que superan, por primera vez en nuestra historia, los 1.000 millones de euros, logrando un beneficio neto récord que ha sido un 28% superior al que obtuvimos en el año 2019. Estas cifras se han traducido en una fuerte generación de caja operativa, por encima del 75% de nuestro EBITDA, que nos ha permitido cubrir todos los desembolsos que ha requerido nuestro crecimiento inorgánico y que nos mantiene un año más con una posición estable de caja neta positiva y una envidiable solidez financiera. Nuestra actividad sigue siendo muy diversificada, con un excelente desempeño en márgenes de contribución que han crecido en todos nuestros segmentos. La ejecución de muchos de nuestros proyectos ha alcanzado niveles de rentabilidad récord este año y seguimos disponiendo de una cartera de proyectos diversificada, tanto sectorial como geográficamente. En el segmento B2B Servicios destacan los nuevos contratos recurrentes en el campo de las redes eléctricas y de telecomunicaciones que consolidan la diversificación planificada. En 2021 también hemos avanzado en nuestra estrategia. Estamos en la recta final del proceso de transformación de nuestro negocio B2C, con nuevos lanzamientos que refuerzan nuestro decidido posicionamiento multimarca, multiproducto y multicanal. Hemos ejecutado la primera fase de la puesta en valor de nuestro negocio de energías renovables con la entrada de un socio minoritario, lo que demuestra el alto potencial de desarrollo de este negocio. Y hemos reforzado nuestra apuesta por la sostenibilidad como fuente de negocio y como compromiso de empresa. Porque en Dominion estamos comprometidos con las personas. Trabajamos por la igualdad de oportunidades de nuestros más de 10.500 empleados en 35 países. Y por la salud y la seguridad de nuestro equipo, que para nosotros es un elemento diferencial en todo lo que hacemos. Estamos comprometidos con el medio ambiente y tomamos acción para mitigar nuestro impacto. Y apostamos por las buenas prácticas de gobierno corporativo para preservar el interés a largo plazo de nuestros stakeholders. Todo esto refleja nuestra pasión y esfuerzo continuo por alcanzar nuestros objetivos y darlos a conocer. 2021, un año de compromisos cumplidos.
Well, these are the data for 2021. 2021 was a pretty complex year because the macro conditions, you know, that they evolved worse. We had several pandemic outbreaks, and even so, for Dominion, we've created lots of growth. It's been a record year for KPIs. And as you've seen, we've seen strategic goals achieved, like our renewables, so our commitment towards sustainability. In 2021, we've continued with the shareholders remuneration policy that started in 19 when we paid out our first dividend. And this year we have spent about 90% of the net profits of 2021 to pay the shareholder. On the one hand, we have the dividend that is the strategic dividend, which is 1/3 of the net profit, which we've maintained year after year. And in 2022, it's just over 14 million, as you saw before. And on the other hand, through the buyback, we have a stable buyback of shares because in 2021, it was 23 million we spent. Our shares have gone up by about 25% in 2021 and above the reference indices. And the truth is that we're not happy with its current listing price because we believe that it's still very far away from its real value. And I wouldn't want this comment to be the perception of a manager that is more or less happy or frustrated with the value of the share, but I would like to present some objective data. Since we were listed in 2016, our profit per share has grown more than 160%, and the EBITDA has grown more than 120%. However, our market capital has only grown by 60%. So this generates certain difficulties, as Anton pointed out before, especially when you generate value through M&A operations. And it means that the buyback option is the best to generate value in the future, although obviously this affects the liquidity of the company. And in any case, you know that we are a solid project, a very solid project, and that can generate value practically under any circumstances and in a recurrent manner. And it's focused on activities that have lots of possibilities of growing. But we will make this known because we think that eventually the company will be situated where it's supposed to stand. But going back to the present, let's talk about 2022 and what remains of our strategic plan. It's only just under 2 years to go now, and we extended it because of the pandemic for 1 more year from 2022 to 2023. And this morning we approved in the board the results of the first quarter of 2022, and I would like to briefly mention these data that you can already see on the website of the company. And you can see that once again, it's a record quarter in terms of absolute figures. The adjusted business figure has grown 4%, and the different margin levels have grown 9%. And comparable net profits have grown 23%, which is a magnificent result. But we should bear in mind that from now on, we have a minority shareholder in the renewables business that before it was 100% Dominion. So therefore, if we want to have an organic parameter that can compare, we shouldn't take into account this minority shareholder. But if we were to analyze by segments, business to business, we have a magnificent performance in terms of sales and margins. And we have new contracts in the area of LATAM sales and Central Europe. We've signed our first telecommunication service contract in Germany. We are now working actively with Endesa in Spain, etc., etc. And in the 360 area, executions are running as programmed. It wasn't a very good quarter for consumption because of the loss in purchasing power brought about by inflation. And we also have the high prices of energy, which, as you know, are still very high. And this can be seen in the margins of the business to customer segment, although sales now are in line with those figures reported in the previous year because of the growth in the prices of energy, and also because of the magnificent behavior of the vertical components of telecommunications and the new verticals that have been created, like the renting mobile phones, where we've reached more than 1,000 newcomers every month. And a very fundamental vertical has to do with the increase in value for our customers. And we've launched a significant marketing and advertisement campaign that we're seeing on television, and which will continue on the television on the internet throughout the year. And what we want to do is increase traffic at shops. So focusing on the challenges we have to deal with, and well, you know that I'm referring all the time, I'm saying that we are facing complex times, and I think that we shouldn't talk about this anymore. I think that the high degree of complexity and disruption are here to stay, and mainly as a consequence of geostrategic factors, fundamentally technological factors too, and things that are related to trends that have to do with sustainability, because these trends, you know, that they use VUCA, volatile, complex, and uncertain. And these are the context of these disruptive situations. And what we have to do is know how to coexist with these situations. And I think that the Dominion model, as was pointed out perfectly well by Andon, has shown that it's resilient in these situations. And technological disruptions are what we call the technological revolution is a constant, but it's also an opportunity to develop our economy and our companies and our societies even further. And it's true that there's always been uncertainty at any company, but I think that the major difference has to do with the speed and depth of changes, and this requires an innovative spirit and a positive attitude. So when you're dealing with change, and this is something that has to be promoted, you don't only have to think out of the box. What you have to do is live out of the box, which is what we say internally, if we don't want to be run over by the context. And this context requires specialist companies like ours that can help us to transition along this path. And we also need to have constant innovation, incorporating technology to processes to make them more efficient and to improve our competitiveness, or at least not lose competitiveness. I think that all these new technologies, you know what is happening with all these immersive technologies with the world of the metaverse requires practical applicators who know them perfectly well, and also the processes so that they can be adapted to the needs of each sector, whether they be industrial or energy infrastructures or the telecommunications sector or even at home, as we're doing right now with this smart house vertical. And we are that partner, that strategic partner that is chosen by our customers to make use of these opportunities offered us by technologies, and we want to go one step further ahead. And there's another change process that has been among us for some time, which is becoming much more transcendental, has to do with the energy transition. Because on the one hand, this forms part of the sustainability goals in relation to the environment. And also, well, the increase in energy prices have shown that we're not only talking about the need to have renewable sources, but we also have to readdress the model completely, because we're facing a change of the energy mix, and we're also facing a change of international dependence, and we're also changing the role of the people involved. There are more commercializing companies, etc., etc. And this means that we're going to activate new mechanisms. And you know that in our case, we are present since 2016 in the renewable sector. And today, we are still positioned in this market where growth is tremendous, both in Latin America as well as in Europe. And in our business mix, energy accounts for more than 20%. You know that it was one of the KPIs we'd established for the end of our strategic plan, which we have brought forward. And we are now looking into new figures like self-consumption, for instance, or auto-consumption, or storage solutions. And if the energy transition is only the tip of the iceberg of this major trend that focuses on sustainability, it doesn't only have to do with the environment and with energy transition. When we talk about sustainability, we're bringing in mind the rest of the aspects, the social impact of our actions and governance. And for this implementation to be realistic or real, we must internalize a new definition of the concept of progress and stop measuring it only in economic terms. And what we have to do is incorporate other indices that to make sure that our actions today will guarantee life for future generations, because we know that this international agreement we belong to and the sustainable development objectives, you know that it's 17. We prefer to simplify them into 4, and what has to do with the preservation of natural resources or social justice, transparency, and diversity. And as a company, it's very clear, because the first step is that we have to be a sustainable firm. We have to deliver a positive impact. We have to bring our practices in line with our societies and the societies where we operate at all levels. We have to advance in terms of the goals we've set in relation to sustainability in 2025. And in the environmental side of things, we have to reduce our carbon footprint by 30%. And because of the vehicles we're using in our service areas. And under S, we have a diversity with a ratio of women in management positions that has to be higher, and there has to be equal opportunities for all. And we've also want to reduce the index of accidents, because you know that that is a priority on the job, because we have 10,600 people employed, and now it's more than 11,200. And G, which has to do with our ethical code, and we want to promote diversity and the independence of our governing bodies. And above all, what we have to do is incorporate ESG criteria to these very items for the remuneration of our teams. And we have to make a bigger effort in transferring all of these best practices to all of our supply chain. And the first step is being, and the second is doing, which is much more related to the business, so that our customers can be more sustainable. And we are very fortunate because of these activities and capabilities we have, we can implement projects and services that have a real impact in terms of improvement, especially with regard to environmental issues. I'm talking about activities that are more and more demanded by our customers, and you know that we will be present, like in the reduction of emissions or recovery of raw materials so that they can be incorporated to production processes, whatever has to do with the circular economy, energy efficiency, and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, we are very present and we want to make our customers more sustainable. And in order for these different interest groups or these stakeholders so that they can evaluate our commitment and progress, we must communicate. Because Dominion, as part of its strategy, is making an effort to communicate with the different stakeholders and through these indices that show how we are evolving. And as you can see, some of the disruptive elements that I spoke at the beginning are the product of our own progress and development, and they can be expected, of course, to happen, as could be, well, our focus on sustainability, the digital revolution, or others. But we have others that are fortuitous, which are a coincidence. And, well, we have the pandemic or the war in Ukraine, and the effects that they produced are not predictable in terms of energy prices, raw materials, and the difficulties we have in the supply chain or inflation. We believe that there are no magic recipes nor no specific measures we can implement anything, but we do believe that we can be a company, as Anton pointed out, that is designed to resist these situations, and that is what we believe is an ecosystem. It's a concept which in our case, the beginning of the company was criticized a lot and which we found difficult to explain. And the important thing at Dominion is the how, it's not the what. It has to do with a cross-cutting approach. But what happens? Well, it's becoming more and more usual, and we are competing in a more interconnected market where the borders between the different sectors and companies are blurring, because we can see more and more ecosystems. We can see that Amazon is an ecosystem, as most of the income of Amazon doesn't come from the market, but they come from the CPDs for companies. They also have Amazon Music. The same thing applies to Apple and with Alphabet and with Google. And they even have taxi firms and Wino. And the same is happening to telecommunications firms. They are now involved in the world of security. Banks are selling energy, or they're sending non-banking products, and et cetera. But in the end, you need to have a management model, which is what we call, in our case, we have to deliver a culture. In the 22 years I've been working for Dominion, since it was established, we've gone through several crises, some more general and others more specific, that have helped us to fine-tune our culture, a business model that have made us be a very resilient company. There's a fundamental word in our culture that is implicit in all of our strategy. It's recurrence in capital letters. And recurrence to do what has to be done in such a complex world. We have to innovate, and we should be able to make a mistake and innovate to not be left lagging behind, so that we can create value continuously and differentially, and limiting the own risks that are related to innovation. And we know that any mistakes we make and which happen in the process are not going to endanger the global growth of the company. We have a business model and a combination of activities that have shown that although the context is not the most favorable one, it is very solid in terms of margins. And I'd say that the same applies to cash generation, and that's what we saw in 2020, that in spite of the situation and in spite of having more than 50% of the outlets closed, and although we had lots of the companies on a temporary redundancy scheme, we were able to generate more than 80 million in EBITDA and nearly 40 million of free cash flow, and of course a positive net profit. And this recurrence is present in each of our business segments. On the one hand, in the business to customer world, in the world of consumers, we've transformed a business that had to do with selling products, as you know, and mobile phones and accessories. It's become a recurrent portfolio business, but the fundamental thing now has to do with the lifetime value of customers. And in the business to business world, we've established a global vision for the value chain, the 360 model, by developing a way of executing projects that delivers high contribution margins and stability with a portfolio 2 years in advance. We have more than 600 million in our solutions area and in services. As you know, they are recurrent. Well, more than 85% of recurrence, and we have a differential vision that produces contribution margins that are above those of the competition. And we're using technology as a tool in our business processes, and we have very efficient operations and with very high quality standards. We have a plan. As I said, there's only 2 years left for it to be carried out in full, and there's no doubt that along this path we are going to have to deal with many difficulties. But over the next few months, we would also have some very exciting challenges, like defining the final strategy of our dominion in terms of concessions. And we'll also have to consolidate the recurrence of our income. And we have to find new formulas and alliances in the business to customer segment. In other words, customers that have to be managed and assets have to be based on concessions. And of course, we have to focus on our service activity and create a dominion environment in relation to all these sustainable solutions that I just pointed out. And in the near past, you saw in the near past that we are not a cyclical company, and this is also linked to being very cautious in terms of financial management, and we're also very innovative, and this will allow us to fulfill our 2023 plan. And as usual, we will manage things in a climate of uncertainty, but we will fulfill our commitments with your support as shareholders, and we will create value for you people too. Thank you very much. Well, before giving the floor to the shareholders, could the Secretary please give us the quorum? Well, according to the definitive data, this is the result. We have here present, or either those that are following us through postal systems, it's 54, representing 61,784,000 shares, which is 38.47% of the share capital. And we have represented 28 shareholders representing 26,525,716 shares, which is 16.51% of the share capital. So therefore, we have here present or represented 83 shareholders that represent 88,350,290 shares, which represent 54.98% of the share capital. And as mentioned previously at the beginning of this AGM, we have shareholders that represented more than 50% of the share capital. Well, I'll say it again. If any of the shareholders wants to make use of the right of information as established in Article 157 on the issues discussed here, now the time has come for you to intervene. You now have the floor. Are there any questions or any queries that the shareholders want to make, or does anybody need any clarifications regarding what has been said here? Well, I think that no clarifications are required, which is a very positive sign, of course. So please, I would like you to subject this now to the approval of the AGM. Well, as from this moment, we will be voting on each one of the issues that form part of the agenda of this AGM. And it's mentioned that as regards the votes that have been issued through the postal system, we have votes against and abstentions in relation to certain resolutions, that this is not going to prevent them from being adopted, of course, but in any case, the details of the votes against and abstentions, you can look this up on the corporate website, and you'll be able to see those things that have been approved, or the items that have been approved at this AGM. So now Let's vote on the different resolutions. The first one has to do with the approval of the annual accounts of our company and the annual accounts of its consolidated group. All of this corresponding to the fiscal year that closed on December the 31st of 2021. Is this approved? Carried. And point number 2 has to do with approving the management of the board of directors. Is this carried? Yes. Point number 3, approval of the results for the year 2021 fiscal year. Approved? Yes. Point number 4, approval of the status of non-financial information of Global Dominion and its dependent companies for the 2021 fiscal year. Is this approved? Yes. Point number 5, approval of the distribution of reserves. Is this approved? Yes. Point number 6, as stated in the previous AGM, the board of directors is authorized to acquire shares either directly or indirectly according to Articles 146 and 509 of the Stock Corporations Law. So the board of directors is therefore empowered to carry out this operation. Is this approved? Yes. Point number 7, the extension or the appointment of the account auditors. Is this approved? Yes. And point number 8, and that is establishing the maximum amount of the remuneration of the board of directors for this fiscal year. Is this approved? Yes, approved, carried. Point number 9 has to do with the approval of the new remuneration policy for the directors for the fiscal years 2023, 24, and 25. Is this approved? Approved. Point number 10, approval of a supplementary long-term incentive that is based on increasing the value of our shares for the CEO and certain members of the board. Is this approved? Yes, approved. Point number 11, ratification and approval of Ms. Paula Fañuña as a member of the board as a proprietary director. Is this approved? Yes, approved. And point 12, the board is to be authorized to increase the share capital according to the terms and limits established by Article 127 of the law, and also allowing to apply the preferential right to purchase up to 20%. This is approved. Point number 13, authorization for the board of directors to issue securities or convertible bonds and warrants, and also establish the conversion criteria, and also faculty to exclude the preferential right to purchase, always with a limit of 20% of the share capital when the authorization is issued. Approved. And point number 14, and from a consultative perspective, voting on the annual remuneration report of the directors of Global Dominion for the 2020 fiscal year. And point 15, delegation of faculties for the execution of these agreements. Is this passed? Yes, approved. So therefore, we have approved all of the resolutions that the items on the agenda have referred to. But to finish, we suggest that we approve the minutes that have been developed during this session. And I would also propose that unless the shareholders wish to state otherwise, we consider that this has been fully read. Are the minutes approved? Yes, they are approved. Consequently, we also approve the minutes of the AGM, and as there are no further issues to discuss, we adjourn the session. We've done it very quickly this time. As we say, when things go well, they are easy to explain. So thank you very much for everybody. Thank you.